I just freaking love it. I knew this was going to be shocking. Oh, this is weird. You might not want those things to be read aloud to you. Lucky. I'm still kind of reeling from it. Hey, no shame. Very outlandish. I haven't been able to get this book out of my mind since reading it. It was so good. Hi, I'm Sam. There's quite literally no one asking me to do this, but I would like to tell you about all of my favorite books that I've read so far this year. So I have read 66 books, so I'm a little bit behind on my goal of wanting to read 150 this year, but I'm kind of okay with that. I have been kind of prioritizing quality over quantity, taking my time, and I think it's been serving me well. So this list is in no particular order. I will be tier ranking all of my reads at the very end of this year, but I will leave that for December 2023, Sam. So I guess the first one I chose that I'm going to tell you about is one that I'm sure you've already guessed because I will not shut up about it, but that is Hawk Mountain by Conner Habib. So I listened to this on audiobook, which was fantastic. This is one of few books that actually made my jaw drop when I listened to it. This is a debut novel too, which makes it that much more impressive. So Conner Habib, he used to be a sex worker and he now has a podcast called Against Everyone with Conner Habib, but this is his first debut novel and it was just fantastic. So in this book, we follow this man called Todd. So he's like at the beach with his son and his son is like kindergarten age and his wife recently walked out on them. So he's kind of reeling from the divorce, but he loves his son. And then all of a sudden, when he's sitting on the beach, this man approaches him. And as the man gets closer, he realizes it was his childhood bully from high school. So once that revelation occurs, pretty much within the first chapter, we switch perspectives back and forth between present day Todd and then little baby high school Todd. So we get glimpses of the bullying that he was subjected to and now present day him grappling with this person re-entering his life and almost kind of trying to weasel his way into his life. So this was extremely gripping, extremely tense, and so good. So I highly recommend this one. Next is one that I had previously read something by this author. So that is Little Eyes by Samanta Schweblin. I had previously read Fever Dream, really liked that. So this is sort of speculative fiction wherein there are these little toy robots called Kentucky, and they're manufactured for the purpose of acting as little assistants. So kind of like Alexas. A lot of people purchase them and like have them as these little like robotic companions. But for every Kentucky that's like in a home working, serving a person, there's another person who has a connection code, could be anywhere in the world, who is basically commanding the movements of the Kentucky. So even though it's a little robotic companion, there is a real person controlling it. So this really opens the story up for a lot of creepy things to go down. And don't get me wrong, there are some sort of heartwarming moments, but for the most part, this is showing the bad side of humanity. And I just loved it. It was super creepy, kept me on my toes. So each chapter we're switching perspectives between someone who has a Kentucky and then someone who has a connection code. It was just really, really good. So I went into this having pretty high expectations because I really liked Fever Dream. This was really good. Samanta Schweblin is becoming a new fave author. Next is another one that is by an author who I had read before, but this was sort of the opposite, where the first book I read of this author's I didn't really like, but this one I obviously loved. So that is Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. So I read Convenience Store Woman by her, and it was fine, you know, like I don't really understand the hype around it, but it wasn't bad. But this was vastly different. Not necessarily the writing, but the content for sure. Where Convenience Store Woman felt very slice of life, this feels very horror. There's a lot of like trauma, awful things that happen to this girl. So this is about a girl named Natsuki who, as a young girl, feels like she's an alien. So she kind of has this imaginary origin story where she's from another planet and she has this little plush toy hedgehog that she thinks is her way to communicate with her home planet. And she's waiting for the day when people from her home planet are going to come and bring her back to her real home. So she is really only close with her younger cousin Yu, who also feels very other, very alien in his family. So when they're kids, they make this pact to survive no matter what. But then there's this terrible sequence of events that happens that causes them to be separated. Then we basically fast forward to now Natsuki is an adult, and she gets the opportunity to reunite with Yu, and the story kind of goes from there. So we learn more about the sequence of events that made them be separated as children, why Natsuki feels like such an alien on Earth, the childhood trauma that she endures and how that shapes who she becomes as an adult, and then ultimately the choices that she ends up making as an adult. So this was really good. The writing was definitely similar to Convenience Store Woman, but it was a lot spookier, a lot more gory, so I liked this one a lot more. Next is a new manga series that I started this year, and I honestly don't know how this flew under my radar for so long, but that is PTSD Radio. So I've also talked about this series quite a bit in my other videos, so I won't belabor the point, but this is a really good series. It's short stories that focus on Japanese folk tales, and the art style is just really cool, very creepy. There's this element of confusion. The stories are so short and switch back and forth so often that it's hard to keep track of the characters, but I kind of think that the confusion adds to the chaos and the sense of being unmoored from reality. So I really don't mind that, and these aren't really strong character-driven stories. The characters are kind of just a vessel to communicate the Japanese folk tales. So, you know, these really aren't that deep or anything, but they're just a silly, goofy, spooky time, and I just freaking love it. So I am really, really enjoying this series, and I think you should read it. Okay, next is a new release from this year. So that is Monstrilio by Gerardo Samano Cordova. Again, another one I've kind of talked about quite a bit on this channel, but I think I liked this so much because I was surprised by how much I liked it. So books that are able to sweep me off my feet unexpectedly tend to be really exciting for me. So this is about a family, and their son Santiago was born with kind of bad lungs, so he unfortunately but expectedly passes away at the age of 11, and his parents are obviously beside themselves with grief, and his mother actually carves out a piece of his lung to save for herself. So after hearing this folktale where if you nurture a piece of someone's body you could bring them back to life, she decides to nurture this lung until it gains sentience and grows into a carnivorous little monster that she names Monstrilio. The story really is obviously a meditation on grief, how if you don't deal with grief, it can manifest in some really gnarly ways. So we follow the mother, the father, a family friend, and then at the end we eventually get the point of view of Monstrilio, and it's really following this family reacting to Monstrilio as he grows and changes and begins to resemble Santiago more and more, while still retaining these sort of like monster-like qualities. He's very carnivorous, his instincts are to hunt and kill, so it's probably one of the most melancholy books I've ever read, and it was simultaneously heartwarming and heartbreaking. I just really loved it. I really, really loved it. So I think if any of that sounds interesting to you, you should give this a try, and yeah, let me know if you like it, because I was pretty shocked by how much I enjoyed this. Okay, next is another one that was a new release this year, and that is Big Swiss by Jen Beagin. I think people either really love it or really hate it. It's definitely very weird, but I think it was so weird that it really endeared me to the story and the characters. So this is about a woman named Greta, and she is a transcriptionist. So she transcribes therapy sessions for a sex coach who calls himself Ohm. And through transcribing patient sessions, she hears about this woman that she affectionately refers to as Big Swiss. And she becomes really fascinated by this woman just because of her sessions and what she reveals in those sessions. And then one day, while Greta is at the dog park with her dog, she hears Big Swiss's voice, and she recognizes that the woman she then sees must be Big Swiss. So she becomes friends with her and doesn't reveal her motives. They develop a relationship. So it says bold, outlandish, and filled with irresistible characters. I think that's a really apt description of this book. Very outlandish. But again, I think that that's really what endeared me to this story. Just so funny, and some of the things that Greta says and does are just so absurd. So I really enjoyed this one. I originally listened to this on audiobook, and the audiobook narrator was really good too. And then I was lucky enough to be able to find a used copy of this book. So Big Swiss, read it if you think it sounds good. Next is one that, again, I knew it was going to be weird going into it, but then when I realized like, oh, this is weird, then I was like, okay, yeah, I really like this. So that is Patricia Wants to Cuddle by Samantha Allen. So this is about a Bachelor-esque reality TV show wherein they opt to have the Bachelor finale in these secluded woods in like the Pacific Northwest in the United States. We switch perspectives between the contestants who are women, a producer on the show, some of the locals where they're staying, and it's just super, super fun. I really enjoyed how each woman feels very distinct, even if they do kind of follow some tropey mechanics. I think that it was sort of fitting. And as we're getting to know their personalities and like how much they actually care about the show and their motivations, people mysteriously are getting picked off by something or someone in the woods. So yeah, this was a lot of fun. There was a lot of really fun gore in this, and I just had a whale of a time. So if that sounds good, you should read it. Okay, last three are ones that I have not yet acquired physical copies of because I either borrowed it from the library or listened to it on audiobook. So next I'll talk about Tampa by Alyssa Nutting. This is one I haven't actually fully talked about yet, and I think I'm still kind of reeling from it. So this is about a woman who is like 27 and she's married, and her husband are like 10 out of 10. They're stunning, gorgeous people, whatever. But she trains to become an 8th grade teacher for the express purpose of grooming and abusing 14-year-old boys. So we're following her point of view. So she is obviously a very twisted person. This is very graphic sexual content, and it gets to a point too where she's so disturbed and messed up in the mind that some of the things she says and does kind of actually come across as funny. It's like one of those things where you're just like so stunned, you like don't know what to do, so you just laugh. Like you can't believe what just actually happened. So yeah, I mean, I knew this was going to be shocking going in, but wow. I haven't been able to get this book out of my mind since reading it, so I am definitely very interested in reading more Alyssa Nutting. I think she's a fantastic writer. It's so impressive that you can write a book about such graphic, dark material and somehow still have these little pockets of humor. I think that takes a lot of talent. So I really, really enjoyed this. I can't say I recommend the audiobook because having those scenes read to you was awful. But the narrator was, she's very talented. So it's not that the audiobook itself is bad. It's just that you might not want those things to be read aloud to you, But yeah, read it if you can. And then next is another one I read earlier this year, Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. This was kind of one that I chose and I was like, oh, this will be like an easy, not like a throwaway read, but kind of. Like I kind of just felt like I needed a palate cleanser. And I was like, okay, I can get it on audiobook. I'll just like pop it on while I'm at work. Very low stakes. Like I had no expectations. And then it just ended up being like one of the most poignant, relatable books I've ever read. And I think I just related so much to the main character, Martha. We're following this like depressed woman, mentally ill woman trying to like navigate life. So I think that those themes and that sort of like story template can be applied to a lot of different books. So I think it can be really tough to stand out. But what I really liked about this is that this was another one that was pretty funny, and it's really mostly her bumbling through life, not really understanding like what's wrong with her. Why can't she just be normal? Why is she sick all the time? Why can't she function like other people? And yeah, that just felt very relatable for me as a fellow mentally ill girly. Even on days where there's nothing more that you want than to just be better and you're just not able to make yourself be better. I think that this book really aptly portrays that, and I just felt very seen by this book. So I really, really enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would. And I think if you are also someone who struggles with having so many sick days against your will and feeling frustrated because you can't seem to get a diagnosis that fits you or medication that really treats the whole problem, then I think you could probably relate to this book as well. So give her a try. And then last is one that I literally just finished like 2 days ago. I just picked this up because I saw that the audiobook was available and I was gonna be like running errands. So I was like, cool, I'll just pop this on while I'm running errands. And it ended up being just like such a freaking delight. It was so good. So that is Open Throat by Henry Hoke, another new release. I've been like on my new release beat lately. So this is about a gay mountain lion who lives under the Hollywood sign. He lives adjacent to a lot of humans humans and a lot of their behaviors. So a lot of it is just like him observing humans and making these really funny observations. And we get a little bit of his backstory, like how he got to be there and why he's alone. And then we're also shown the effects of like climate change on his ability to survive and live in the park. So I don't really want to say much more than that because it is really short and I don't want to give too much away, but holy crap. This was another kind of melancholy read where it was simultaneously heartwarming and funny, but also heartbreaking. And if you would have asked me at the beginning of this year if one of my fave characters of the year would be a gay mountain lion who lives in Hollywood, I would have been, honestly, okay, I guess I wouldn't have been that surprised, but that wouldn't have been my first guess. So I think you should really read it. It's very sweet. Yes. Okay. The best freaking books of 2023 so far. These are really, really good, and you should read them if you haven't already. This was really fun. I always really like talking about the books I love. You can like this video if you want, comment, subscribe if you want. I would love to have you. And let me know what your favorite books of the year have been so far. I would love to hear it. Give me all your recs. You know I'm always expanding the TBR. So, I love you guys so much, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.